So the agenda today is I'm gonna say a little bit for those who don't know me yet. I'll say a little bit about me and my background and why I'm doing the work I do. Then we'll go through what I talked about as three secrets. So we'll talk a little bit about why trying to change often doesn't work, and I think why uh, I think it often doesn't, and I think that also contributes to a certain amount of skepticism towards transformation. And then I will talk a little bit about how it is possible to have substantial results even in the first session. Sometimes when we think about therapy, it depends, but some therapeutic modalities have this very long time horizon, and I think it's very nice to answer the question of how can you get substantial results already from the first session, because of course that will uh, it's nice, and it's also something that keep people involved and engaged if you can if you get results from the get-go. And then the final one is the stuff I work with. I like to develop something that can be useful for many different modalities of therapy, and inversely I also like to be very eclectic. So I like to find new approaches, new techniques from wildly different modalities of therapy. And I have two questions that I always ask, and I feel unless I can answer those two questions, I can't really use the modality, and I'll share those questions with you. So that's the agenda, and then in the end, of course, I'm going to say a little bit about where you can learn more. There's a book that I have finally published. I've been writing intensively for 2 years. I've been making, uh, I've been trying to start for maybe 10 years, so I'm extremely happy that it is finally out. I say one book, but I think that's a bit of a misnomer because it's 636 pages. So I'm currently being interviewed for a podcast, and we do one chapter at a time. And after the podcast, I read the first chapter. She told me, I feel that that was a book in itself, just the first chapter. So, but I'm very happy to have been able to sort of put the panoramic view into one book. And I know Mike, I know you already gotten it. I don't know, has anybody else already pre-ordered it? Oh, so two here. Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, I'm very happy. As you read it, feel free to mail me with any questions you have. For me, it's also an invitation to a dialogue. I'm very happy to have a dialogue around these things. This is what makes it really fun for me to get it out there and then being able to get some input back. So yes, so let's dive in. So about me, I have studied different systems of personal and spiritual development. I've studied a bit with I did Claudio Naranjo's Enneagram SAT group, where I was fortunate enough to do that before he passed. I've been studying with Faisal Mukaddam, and I've been looking into Tibetan Buddhism with Chogyam Rinpoche and so on. So quite a variety. I've done quite a bit of NLP many years ago, so I've been tasting all these modalities, and now I'm fortunate enough to be working as an external examiner on the final exams for a lot of different therapeutic schools here in Denmark, which is really interesting. They want to turn psychotherapy educations into master educations, and so they needed people like me with PhDs to be able to do that. So they needed that people like me to have the to help with assessing the final exams, and so I get even more tastes. I recently did the final exams at the Gestalt Institute here and so on. So that's like one side of it, and then there's the other side, which is many years ago I studied physics, so natural sciences. And I have my PhD is from Cranfield School of Management, so that's the social sciences. And so I have one leg in personal and spiritual development and one leg in various forms of science. And I'm really passionate about bridging these worlds. So a cornerstone in my work is that I want to bridge, make bridges between therapists and psychologists and spiritual teachers and scientists, because many times, I think in the public debate, these different groups seem to have a lot of conflicting views. And I think a lot of those conflicts actually do not need to be there. I think when you understand uh, the different camps more in depth, there is much more that bind them together than that separates them. And this is something that I really like to help build those bridges. And I think one of the ways to build the bridges is by creating a common language. So from the start, my book project was very much about creating a model and a common language that all of these groups, that I hope all of these groups can buy into, and that can facilitate dialogue between these groups. So yes, so this was a bit about me. And then I'll get to the first secret, right? The first secret. So I think this is a big question that many people who are professionally involved with therapy ask themselves. We kind of know that sometimes transformation can happen, right? Sometimes there are these breakthrough moments where people, they engage in a practice, or they come to a session and something happens, and they're just some positive change happen, and they don't go back. It's not, there's no effort involved in maintaining the change, and there's no fallback. And of course, that is the big question: how does this happen? And so I know some people are very engaged in answering this question. I have provided some answers in my book, but I think before you can answer that question, it's also good to answer the flip side. Why doesn't it happen every time? And I think the reason it doesn't happen every time is because we fundamentally misdiagnose what the kind of problems we're trying to solve really are. So when clients come to therapy, they often come with a wish to change something, right? So they might say, I feel I'm not very confident, so I would like to become more confident, and I need to figure out how do I get more self-confidence? Should I achieve something great? Should I speak differently to myself? Should I think differently? What do I need to do? I need to do something to get this thing that I'm missing, which you can call confidence. Or maybe you come to therapy and you say, I would like to have a more loving relationship to my partner or my children, or maybe I just want to find a more loving partner so that there can be more love in my life, right? I have to find the right person so that there can be more love in my life, because that's something I feel I'm missing. Or maybe if you look at the work, you can say something like, I need to figure out what to do with my work life so that it can bring me more satisfaction. I want a more satisfying work life, something like that. But the template is the same. There's something I'm missing, and I need to figure out what to do in order to get it. And when we look at the strategies that we then invent for ourselves, many times they backfire. So maybe, for example, you say, in order to become more confident, you need to engage in positive affirmations, right? So you say nice things to yourself, you look in the mirror, you say nice things to yourself every morning, but you don't really feel it does, but there's still a lot of situations where you feel you lack the confidence. And so now you are also feeling that you are failing at creating more confidence in your life, and then that's taking a toll on your confidence, and it has kind of the opposite effect of what you hoped for. Or of course, with if you go out and think, well, I need a more loving partner to have more love in my life, you find somebody, you're very excited about them, and after 3 months, what happens? You figure out they have the same flaws as the last one, or maybe they have a whole new set of flaws. But in any case, it didn't work. The same with the job. Sometimes you say, well, I want the promotion. I think that will be more satisfying with more responsibility. You get the most responsibility, you get a pay raise. And after half a year, the first half year, maybe it seems to work great, but if after half a year, it's just a job. And so it doesn't bring the satisfaction you hope for. So this is what we see over and over and over again. The strategies we employ seem to work a little bit, but then they don't work. I think in order to understand why they don't work, there's a couple of observations that are really important. I think the first observation that we have to make is to see what we are usually after is a feeling. Why do you want you want the new job because you want to feel satisfied? You want the new partner because you want to feel love. You want to achieve something big in life because you want to feel confident. So we say we're searching for all sorts of different things, but the reason we're searching for these things is because there's a feeling we want to get. And it can be feelings like peace and love and confidence and all these sort of things. The second observation that I think is really important to have, or to something that I think is important to notice, is many of the feelings that we seek, we can actually experience through meditation. So, and I'm not talking about some elaborate meditative practice or something. I'm just talking about sitting down and not doing anything for a while, and being fine with just sitting and not doing anything for a while. And many times you sit down, you don't do anything for 20 minutes, and all of a sudden you feel so light-hearted, you feel so joyous, you feel so at ease, you feel so peaceful. You don't even remember what all the dramas of your life were about. I remember a friend of a friend, actually a childhood friend, who I hadn't seen for many years, contacted me. She'd been through a very stressful period. And then she'd engaged in meditation. Basically, she'd just put a nice armchair in the attic, and sometimes she would go there and sit there for 15 minutes, right? That was a meditation. And then she called me and said, something weird happened, and I can't understand it. I said, oh, that sounds interesting. What happened? She said, I sit in my chair, I don't do anything, and suddenly I feel profoundly happy. How is that possible? How can I feel happy if I didn't do anything to get it? And I think if you meditate, you say, well, of course, but I think it shows that to people who don't meditate, this really runs counter to our normal way of thinking about things. The normal way of thinking about things is there's a feeling, it's missing. If it's missing, it's because it isn't there, and then I have to do something to get it. But the fact that you can just sit down, do absolutely nothing, and suddenly it's there, I think that reveals that we fundamentally get the problem wrong. The problem isn't that the state we seek isn't there. The problem is we're too busy to notice it. So it's not that there's something missing in our life we have to create. It's that there is something precious already present in our life, and we have to learn to pay attention to it. And getting something is a fundamentally different problem than noticing something. And so I think if the problem is that there's something that's missing we have to get, okay, we have to figure out what's the strategy, what should we do. If the problem really is there's something precious that we are not noticing, well, then the question is, what's taking our attention away from it, and how can we notice it? And so in the book I've written, I frame this, I need to give it a name, right? So I call it being-centered therapy. And the idea here is that what you notice when you just sit in your chair and do nothing, you notice presence, you notice what it feels like to just be. And this is really what we are longing for. And the root of so many psychological issues are really just this, that we've lost awareness of what it feels like to just be. So the idea of being-centered therapy is, rather than trying to fix a lot of psychological issues, start by cultivating awareness of being and see if there's any issues left after that. So, yes. So, in many spiritual traditions, you hear this. People will say something like, it's already in you, you just don't notice it because you're too busy looking for it. And for me, this is spot on. You are so busy trying to figure out what it is you need to achieve that you don't notice that if you just sit and do nothing, you feel quite confident, you feel at ease, you feel comfortable in your own skin, and that's what you call confidence. You're so busy trying to find the right partner or to change the one that you have into a more loving one that you don't notice that if you give up that whole change process and just notice what it feels like to be, you say, oh, that now I feel the love I was looking for, right? And it's much nicer to find it in this way, because then you don't put pressure on your partner to produce it for you, which your partner cannot do, and also it's a very unfair thing to outsource. So and similar, of course, with the work, right? You're so busy trying to figure out what is the position you have to get in order to feel satisfied. And again, you're outsourcing satisfaction. You know, my work needs to satisfy me. But actually, when you sit down and feel what it feels like to be profoundly satisfying, profoundly nourishing, and then you can always go out and sort of engage in a different way with work life and with partners. But it's much easier to solve the problems that remain if they're not conflated with the problem of how to find these feelings, which are fundamentally just aspects of being, of presence. So I think that for me, this is the first secret, right? Why does our efforts to try and change things in our life, doesn't it work? And I say it's because we're fundamentally working on the wrong problem. We are misunderstanding what the problem is. We think it's about getting something we don't have, and of course, if that's the way we approach it, then our any answers to how to get it will be flawed, because we already have it. We just need to pay attention to it. We need to notice it. Good. So that was a little bit on the first secrets. So then the second secret is, how do you get results in the first session? And I really think this is incredibly important, because many times when I do workshops or sessions for that matter, I try to I try to make the conditions so that it's likely that people will have a good, clear experience of being. Because that will be, if you get that good, clear experience of love or peace or satisfaction or joy, you'll say, there's something here. And now you have the motivation to keep walking this path. And so I think this is incredibly important. And I think the way to create results in the first sessions is really a key is how you conceptualize a result. If somebody comes to you with low self-esteem and they say a result means I'll never have low self-esteem in any context ever again, you might wait a long time to get a result, right? Because this can take an incredibly amount of time. Like a fun personal anecdote, I've worked a lot as a musician. I've been around work-wise. I worked a lot as a musician, and in the beginning I was incredibly nervous when I was on stage. I was playing piano, right? And oh my God, when it came time to do the solo, it's like, oh my God, I was so nervous. After a couple of years, not nervous anymore. I was like, as long as the drums keep playing and I sort of do something, it's fine. So not nervous anymore. Okay, then I get the opportunity to go on stage, and somebody else is going to play the music, but I'm going to be part of I'm going to dance. So I do some dance performance to the music. And I'm thinking, it's going to be nothing, right? Of course, I'm not going to be nervous. I've been on a stage a million times. This isn't going to be nothing. Go on stage, all the nerves are there, right? Just because it's a different context, it's something new. So I think this idea that to eradicate some problematic state from your life can take a long time. And so I don't think that's a useful way of conceptualizing what results are. If, on the other hand, you say the result is a result means a clear and direct experience of being, very possible to get that from already in the first session. And so I think that that is really useful. I think there's a couple of things to say about this. I think there's a couple of really advantages in working in this way. One of the advantages is that for every single time you have a clear experience of being, it's like adding resources. And so you can then work with the issues you want to work with more and more resources. The other thing that I like about it is sometimes when we work with clients, clients say, I want to work on this issue. But I think everybody who worked with clients knows that the issue the client picks might not actually be the first one you're supposed to work with. Actually, in order to solve this, you might need to work a little bit around the edges, right? Before you can work with, let's say, the issue of aggression, right? Maybe they explode. They have a lot of aggression and they explode. And maybe before we can really do anything meaningful with this, we have to work with issues of vulnerability and sadness. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe the client wants to work with vulnerability and sadness, but that's actually because that's the safer bit. And before we can work with that, we have to work with some repressed anger, and so on. So there's a sequence in how to work with different issues. And I think if we just look for opportunities to connect to being, and then we let those experiences do the work for us. Many times I have seen how that it's almost like activating an inner healing property in the person. It's a little bit, I like to say, if you cut your hand, the wound will heal, but you don't know the sequence, right? You know there's something like the blood coagulates and then something else happens, and at some point the coagulated blood falls off and there's new tissue, and I don't even know what the sequence is, but I don't need to know because my body knows. And it's a little bit the same in the psyche. If we connect to being, then things kind of unfold in the right order, and we don't have to think about it. And I love this about working in this way, that as a therapist, I don't have to figure it out. My job is to help people get clear experiences of being. Then that will take care of the rest. I don't have to worry about the sequences and stuff like that. It takes the pressure off as the therapist. So just to illustrate this a little bit more, you can say, what would that actually look like in a therapeutic setting? So maybe somebody comes to you and they want to, let's stick with the same example, right? Somebody wants to work with low self-esteem. And in the first session, you might say, okay, wonderful. So you want to be more confident. Describe to me what that feels like. So in the book, I call this the path of completion, right? We take whatever the client wants to change in their life. We don't really help them change it, but we ask, what's the end goal? Really go all the way to the end. What's the end goal? And they might say, oh, but if I already had the confidence, it would be such a so relaxing. I would feel so at ease. I would feel like all the nervous energy just dropping down, and I could breathe deeper. And I really encourage them to describe the felt sense experience of it. At some point when you're describing the felt sense experience of confidence, you'll feel that felt sense. Then I can ask, do you feel it now? They'll say yes, and I say, we found a shortcut, right? Now you notice it because it's here. We noticed it, right? We We used the plan as a way of directing the attention to what was already here. Cool. So, clear experience of being, the settled aspect of being. Then in the second session, maybe they come back and they say, well, actually, I still feel very insecure in certain situations. We go, fantastic, let's look at it. And maybe we'll discover that the insecurity has something to do with them being very afraid of their own aggression and therefore repressing it. And therefore they don't have the energy they need to stand up for themselves. And then I like to do something like, in the book I would call this the path of taboos. I absolutely love this, right? I will tell people to say, well, what would you like to do if there are no social norms and no laws, right? If there's no negative consequences, what would you like to do? And of course, sometimes people will describe quite horrendous scenes about what they would like to do to other people, but they will all have a big smile on their face while they're doing it, right? While they're throwing people out the window and punching them in the face and stuff like that. Because they have the permission to say, actually, this is what I really want to do. And then I will say, what do you feel now that you don't? So now if you have to repress all these impulses, that's going to take up more or less all your attention. And then you don't have attention to spare to notice what it feels like to be. But when you don't have to repress it, all the attention that was bound up in this project is released. And you can say, what do you feel like now? And people say, I can breathe freely. I feel so much more alive. I had a wonderful session once with a manager. She was very frustrated with her employees. But she didn't want to express that because she thought that meant she was failing as a manager, right? If you're angry with your employees, you're failing as a manager. And when she finally sort of like said, I think they are hopeless and I really just want to do this and that, the other, she describes all the vitality that comes up in her. And I never forget how she looks at me at some point and go like, hang on a sec. What I feel now feels like taking leadership. That's what I'm paid to do, right? So it went from being something she was scared of, a taboo, but when she connected with just the felt sense of it without her judgments around it, she's like, this is pure vitality, this is leadership, this is like courage, this is actually an incredibly important resource, right? This is an aspect of being. So I love this going through taboos as a way of reaching being. And of course, there's a lot of therapeutic modalities that work a lot with that, right? I think more old school, you have the encounter groups or primal therapy or those kind of things where people engage with emotions they would normally be scared of and just commit to them. But we also had the tantric traditions are very much about engaging with taboo. So I mean the old school Hindu tantric traditions, right? So it's not just sexual taboos; it's all sorts of taboos. They have the right hand and the left hand tantra, one where they imagine breaking the taboos and then losing the fear of it and being freed of by that. And the ones where they say, nah, it's not enough to imagine it. We have to go out and do it, right? So there are lots of traditions that work with that. But now we've had the two sessions. In the first one, we had a clear perception of the settled aspect of being. In the next one, we had a clear perception of the vitality of being. Maybe in the third session, I'll invite the client to reflect on. So you want to get this thing called confidence, right? But what would it be like to just give up that project? It's hard work. It's a lot of energy. You tried it for decades. Just skip it. What about just living your life without any confidence, right? What if it was absolutely fine to just stop running after confidence? And many clients, after sort of an initial, you can't mean that, they go, actually, that is such a relief, right? And they go, oh man, just having permission to give up this, because it's just the social pressure. Everybody say you have to be confident. And maybe it's okay to not be so confident in all situations. And they feel the relief, and now they're no longer running after it. And again, all the attention that was bound up in the pursuit of confidence is now released. And they can notice, what does it feel like to just let yourself be here, confidence or not. And they feel the relief. Many people will feel a profound sense of peace. And so you see, they're still not gonna feel super duper confident in all situations in life, but they have experienced the settled aspect of being, the vitality of being, the peace of being. That's amazing. 3 sessions, and we've already gotten that a little bit of a panoramic view of how being can feel. And going forward with that settledness, that vitality, and that peacefulness, maybe they can deal with the situations they need to deal with without trying to manufacture something that could be called confidence. So we might have solved the problem after all. So for me, this is when we think therapy in terms of bringing clear, direct perception of being, it's very possible to have results from the first session. Of course, you're not going to have one of these experiences in every single session. That's fine too. But you can have it quite often, and it can be then you can work from a much more resource based place, and I find that's really helpful. Okay, so far so good. Let's go for the third secret. So the third secret is I think just like in the second secret, it's the reason I choose it, of course, is because some people might say, okay, being centered therapy, is this a new thing? Is it something that's gonna take forever, or can I do something? Do I get quick results? And I think the answer is pretty clear. You can actually get results pretty quickly. You just have to reframe what you mean by results. And in the same way, especially if you're curious about this approach, being centered therapy, but you've already taken an education as a Gestalt therapist, as a cognitive behavioral therapist, in metacognition or whatever it is, right? You've already have your tools. And so another question might be, does this mean I have to sort of learn a whole new tool set, and can I use the things that I already know? I've tried to create a system that's compatible with whatever modality of therapies that people are already familiar with, either using with their clients or the ones that they're familiar with in their own process. And I think this system just adds something to it. And what it adds is that it invites you to ask 2 questions about any therapeutic modality or approach that you're using. The first question is, can this modality help myself, clients, become aware of being? I think all modalities can do that. I've already mentioned quite a lot of modalities in my examples. I think all modalities can help you disengage your attention from whatever keeps it trapped, so that you can so more of your attention can just be in the presence, and you can notice what that actually feels like to be in the present. And yes. The other question that I think is equally important to ask is, how can the modality become a trap that actually takes your attention away from the presence? I think there's no modality that can't become a trap. And I think in order for you to master a modality, you have to understand how it can become a trap for your attention. So I can give some examples. One of the, in the book I have, you can say I have categorized the kind of patterns that take your attention away from being in 5 groups. And each group, then there's a corresponding way of becoming aware of being. So one thing that sometimes traps our attention is just abstract thinking. We get caught in ideas about the present moment instead of feeling the present moment. And there's a lot of modalities that basically just point directly to the present moment. So a lot of mindfulness-based practices are really about that. Just notice what's here and now. Gestalt therapy does it a lot. What are the things that you're feeling in this moment? Don't hypothesize about what you might be feeling in some future scenario or what you felt in the past. Just now, what's happening, right? So it directs you towards now. I think on the spiritual side, something like metta meditation, meditation on compassion. Compassion is one aspect of being. And this meditation says just pay attention to that. You can meditate on stillness, you can meditate on joy, you can meditate on any aspect of being. And that's a very direct way of saying, here it is, right? Just pay attention to this. And then you can say, well, how can that become a trap? And I think the way it can become a trap is that you can start saying, okay, so I pay attention to compassion, but then there's also other things in me that's not compassionate. And now I say, well, it's so nice to be with compassion, so now I start to push aside the other things. But now your attention gets occupied with the project of judging things as compassionate or not, and pushing aside the ones that fail the test. And now you get more occupied in repressing everything you don't see as compassionate than just feeling the compassionate aspect of the present moment. And I think a lot of the practices that focus on something like this, they can become a method that you engage in, which then ends up being what takes your attention away from presence. Another big part of another thing that takes our attention away from presence is, of course, when we make these future plans, right? What do I need to do to get all these yummy things that I'm after? And the corresponding therapeutic traditions they look to the end. I call them this is the path of completion. One of my favorite examples is the core transformation process, where you notice something in yourself, and then you ask the question, what are you trying to get through that impulse? And when you answer the question, then you will ask the question again, what are you trying to get through that, and through that, and through that, and through that? In the end, you're going to end up paying attention to sensations of love and unity and so on, which are aspects of presence. So how can that become a trap? And I think the main trap is if you, for example, say, okay, so you really want a promotion or something like that. And then you interrogate, what is it you want to get through the promotion? And in the end, you find the aspect of being, where maybe you feel the deep, profound sense of satisfaction. Some clients will draw the wrong conclusion. They will say, now I really know what I can get from getting the promotion. And they get more enthusiastic about the project that originally took their attention away. So you have to watch out for that, right? Not making it more appealing to engage in these change processes, but make it less appealing. So you really have to say, you're feeling it now without doing the thing. Be sure you draw the right conclusion from that. It means you don't have to do the thing to feel this feeling. And so on. So yeah, does this make sense how there are different modalities? By asking how can they facilitate awareness of being, and how can they become a trap for your attention that takes your attention away from being, that's a really good way of mastering it. With the taboo thing, I think that's such a funny thing. Sometimes people will engage with something they're afraid of, right? They're really afraid of their vulnerability. They engage with their vulnerability. They cry. They feel the sense of being melted, the sense of compassion, the sense of human connection. They say, man, fantastic, right? This is wonderful. And then they say, in their mind, they say, okay, first I find something I'm afraid of, then I face it, and then I feel great. And so they will come to the therapy session and they'll hunt for things they're afraid of. And you say, well, why do you do that? Because I have to find something to be afraid of, that so that I can engage with it, so I can feel good. And I say, well, how do you feel now? And they say, well, I feel great. Well, why don't we skip the detour then? Right? So sometimes it's really fascinating to see it, how sometimes it's like there has to be tears before I can feel good. And then that becomes undermining, because they literally push aside positive inner states, because this is not going to help me find the positive inner states. So yes, It sounds funny when you say it, but I mean, I'm sure you've seen it, right? So yeah. So so this is the third approach to or the third secret. Ask those two questions of any modality you use. How can it facilitate becoming aware of being, and how can it become a trap that takes your attention away from being? So these are the three secrets. And in a moment, I'll open up for Q&A. So we have some time here at the end for Q&A. And I have a small present for you as well. But I just want to say, if you find this stuff interesting, then I have now finally finished the book, and it's available, and you can get it. And because the printer has delayed the delivery for 2 days, it's still possible to pre-order it at a discount. Hopefully that will not be possible in a few days, because hopefully it will be delivered in a few days. But for now, and I'll give you the links in a bit. So that's one thing. And if you say, well, actually, a book is not enough, I want something more, then I am doing an education, a 5-module education on this. I've already run it while I was writing the book. It was very much fun. It was a way of making myself, putting up deadlines for myself to finish the chapters, because I had to finish the chapter before I ran the module. I cursed myself for setting it up like that but now I'm happy about it. So the education, when you sign up for the education, you get quite a few things. I even have a slide for it. I'm just gonna, because I think it's easier with a little bit of visual aid. I promise you I'm not gonna use a ton of time for this, but I'm just gonna show you. Let me see. There, because I made such a nice slide. Share here. So when you sign up for the education, this is it, right? So there's there are 5 modules, 2.5 days each. These are the 5 modules, and they correspond to, I've been talking about 5 different patterns that take your attention away from being, and 5 different ways of getting it back. I've talked a little bit about the completion, taboos, unity, agency, and abundance, and some of the other names that I use for how to find it. Then you get the book for free. If you already pre-ordered it or bought it and you decide to go for the education, I will be happy to deduct the price and postage you paid for the book from the price of the education. Fair is fair, right? Then you'll get, I'll send everybody who's on my course, they'll get a specific email, because I am not super fast at answering email, but this email I answer fast. And sometimes if you learn something like that and you want to apply it between modules, you don't want to wait until the next module to ask your questions, right? Because you forget your questions before you get to the next module. So you can just ping me a mail, and then I'll answer it as quickly as I can. Then you get access to all my online courses. There's a couple of them by now. Some of you already have this one. Normally I charge for this one, but for the Christmas calendar, you signed up for free. And then of course there's a membership page where you can connect with other people in the education. I find that a lot of people find this incredibly interesting, because I get people on the course that work with very different modalities, and it's so interesting to learn from each other like that. And just to say, let me say here, so this is the normal price, but I'll give you an offer because you showed up for the webinar, which a lot of people didn't. But yeah, so you have to be rewarded for that, right? And I'll send you some link to this secret price, and there's also a possibility of doing something with breaking it up into installments. Okay, enough with the promotion. I'll stop the sharing here, and I'll just give you I prepared a little blob with links. Here we go, and let me just put it in the chat here. Boom. So now you have the links in the chat to the secret prices and to pre-ordering the book if you haven't already done it. Good. So that was the presentation and a little bit about how to learn more. And I'm of course curious if you have any questions. We have a little bit of time for Q&A.